Hi everyone, I just wanted to do another quick video about how to get your design onto some fabric. I think having a really solid design ready to go will make your embroidery look better in the end, and it'll make your experience a lot more enjoyable. What is this? So I know I've done some work before where I kind of I don't do a great job tracing it, and I'm thinking, well, I'll just figure it out as I go. And I wouldn't recommend that necessarily unless you're going for like a free flow kind of look. But I think it's just having a good design up front, especially with embroidery. It's such a time consuming process. You really want to make sure you know where you're going with it. So unless, like I said, that's your process that you enjoy kind of working it out as you go. Okay, so here's a couple options that I will not be showing you, but these are good options. First is the sticky Fabrisolvi here, this stuff from Sulky. Basically, it fits in your printer. Ta-da! And I hold on to the pieces that I haven't used yet, so I have a bunch of scraps in here, but here's what it looks like. Here's just a design that got printed on there. And what you do is you stick it on your fabric. I would have the fabric in the hoop first, so let's go ahead and do that. Now, one thing I do want to say about the fabric in the hoop is I have done some tracing with the fabric like this before, but I'm starting to really like having the fabric tight when I trace. Fabric it's not like a piece of paper, right? Like, it can warp, right? Like, that's how come we can get it in a hoop and why it's, comfortable to wear. So, there's a possibility that you could trace your design, and then once you get it in the hoop, find that it looks a little off. I find that especially true with lettering and with like perfect circles, which makes sense. So I especially like to wait to trace until I'm in the hoop when doing those things. So I am tightening my hoop. A lot of this information is also in my free sampler tutorial, guys. So if, there's going to be a little overlap with that information, but whatever. Okay. So I got my hoop nice and tight. Feels pretty good. So, like I said, let's see, do I have a hoop I can grab? Here, let me grab this hoop. All right, so when I like to do circles or any kind of like design where I want a perfect centered look, I'll just use another hoop as a guide, and use that circle. Like for this design where I end up having vines coming down on either side, I'll trace this part onto my hoop, and then I'll come in and do this to make sure it is a perfect circle. And then it's easier for me to see too. It's easy to center it, because you want to make sure, like, let's say you have text, you want to make sure it's like, if you want it centered this way and this way, kind of helps to use another hoop as a guide. Ta-da! Okay, so back here. So for this stuff, you'd take the sticker off the back and just plop it on there, and then you stitch through it. It obviously isn't going to feel just like stitching through fabric. It is pliable, but you can feel it. And when you're done, you then have to get this wet to remove this sticky stuff. It's not my favorite just because that process of removing the sticky stuff is kind of time consuming. This is nice when you're going to be embroidering like a darker fabric or a thicker fabric that you can't see light through to trace. So in those cases, I think it is worth the hassle. So that's my 2 cents on that. Carbon paper you can find it in any craft store. If you use the yellow, you can try this if you're going to be doing like a darker fabric, or also a light pencil. I think that's probably your best bet. The way this carbon paper works is you put it carbon side down on your work like that, and then you would put your design where you want it, and then you would use a pen to trace, and it works like, you know, those checks with the carbon the carbon copies of your checks. Does anyone still do that? I don't even know. So that's how that works. It'd probably be tricky to do it on this surface. I don't think it would work, but you could always flip your hoop over and then you'd have a hard surface behind you and still have that tension that I'm talking about. So those would be my recommendations if you're going to be using a darker fabric. When I have a fabric that's dark but not like impossible to see through, I'll use a Sharpie because it has a nice thick line. So like I have this dark turquoise fabric that I use a lot, and this actually shows up pretty well on it. So you really don't need any of those for a fabric like this light stuff. So these are what I use the most often. So these are water soluble. So you want to make sure that you are not using like a hand dyed floss or like anything with a really deep red, because it's possible that when you get your fabric wet to remove this pen, you're going to get bleeding, especially with that hand dyed stuff. So you can see the line is kind of thick. I mean, if you look at this design that I want to transfer, like it's really tiny. So in this case, I'm not going to use this pen. It would probably work out okay, but I want to make sure, you know, for this video that it's like perfect. So we will skip this. Okay, so that brings us down to these. So they're both pretty fine tip. Ta-da. This one is a micron and it's going to last forever. So I just grabbed an 05. So I like those. I mean, there's smaller ones. You can get one that's a 1/10 this size, but we don't need that today. So this one, though, is disappearing ink, which makes me feel like a spy. It's awesome. So it will come out in water. I find that in the climate I'm in, the Pacific Northwest, it disappears pretty quick. So if I'm going to like trace today and stitch tomorrow, maybe not, you know. So one thing I like to do is I trace with this, knowing that it's not permanent, which is good and bad, right? So I'll trace, and then once I see what I have, I'll go over those lines with the permanent. And that's because I'm afraid. This is so I can make mistakes. So this is like the process I go through when I do lettering or when I do a really small detailed design like this. So let's do it. Okay. Hopefully I'll have enough light here. I have a light table, but I really don't use it that much. Although it's August, so ask me again in a few months when the sun disappears. Oh, I'm sad already. Okay. I'm going to do a couple other designs on this, so I'm going to be a little off-centered here. Okay, I'm just taping it down with freaking my Costco tape. Okay, I love Costco. All right, can you see that? Let's see. Yeah, here you go. So it is a little faint, and part of that is because this design I have, I should have done it thicker, which I will do eventually for you all. Okay, so harder to do on camera than I thought. Interesting. I'll be right back. I'm back, and look what I did. Okay, doesn't that look way better? Okay, get rid of that guy. Try again. Okay, oh look, I can actually see it now. Fantastic. All right, so I'm just going to trace. That's my printer. It's also garbage day, so we might hear some garbage trucks. Can you tell I'm concentrating? I'm very quiet. I gotta make sure it doesn't look like a you-know-what. It's the hardest part about flowers. There's a line. Okay. Almost done. Ta-da! Okay, so now we have a rose. My design is transferred. So obviously this was a tiny design, so it didn't take very long, but I mean, if you have a really big design, give yourself the gift of time and just think of it as another project. Sometimes I get really impatient because I just want to stitch, okay? But don't give yourself that time and that space. Get comfortable. Like sometimes I'll be standing up or at an awkward place. Like no, sit down, get yourself a nice cup of tea, and just take your time and trace the lines. You know, you'll really appreciate it later when you're stitching. So that's it. I'm just gonna trace this now with my ink. I think I'm gonna just stitch this up here pretty quick, but I'm going to trace it anyways. So that's it. But thank you for watching. And let me know if you have any questions or any suggestions. Anything else you would like to see. This pen is crap. I think I actually do need a skinnier pen for this. I'm sorry. Excuse my language. I need to be more conscious of that, my friends. Yeah. Okay. I'm so bad at multitasking, you guys. I'm like concentrating really hard, so I have nothing clever to say. But you're not here for clever. You're here for embroidery. So, one of the drawbacks of doing this in the pen, obviously, afterwards, is that, you know, I need to make sure all these guidelines are covered by my stitches. So I gotta be careful, obviously. And then when I'm stitching, you know, you want to come down with your needle on the outside of those guidelines around the edges. So that's it. All right, namaste, my friends.